what are we doing with these modern applications to ensure that they're not going to calcify the same way that these older applications did? I know we've got like shiny DevOps and Agile and all that, but my concern is that at a certain point, it'll start calcifying and just becoming, oh, this is the way we do it. And something new will come out and we won't be able to make the move to that newer technology or that newer concept or idea.
I think broadly speaking, it's always hard to fight, as you say, calcification across any sort of tech, right? The moment you build it, it starts to get old. But the difference to me was historically, experimentation and deployment was hard, long, and expensive. And now those things are all, quick, easy, and cheap. So it's just so much easier to try things, and so many people are trying all these different things all at the same time. It's almost like we're, the million monkeys trying to write a novel, and some of us are going to randomly get it right, and so actually I think many people will. And so now you see, like, even in containers, there's so many different opinions on how to deploy things. There's so many different places you can deploy them. You can put it on old stuff, you put new stuff. So I think that helps. And just good hygiene. If you've got a good pipeline in place, wink, nod, finger gun, it's way easier to stay modern because you're having to worry about dependency mapping and where your artifacts are going and what versions you have for your framework. And it's really easy to put pieces in and take other pieces out. So I think that's a pretty big win.
Okay, develop that idea in more detail with the pipeline. You made the case that the pipeline gives me this flexibility where I can substitute pieces and parts of my process in and out, as opposed to what was I doing before if I didn't have a pipeline? And moving to a pipeline means I've got all this flexibility. It almost sounds magical.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of what I'm talking about for that modularity exists. It lends itself more to the application development world. But even in the infrastructure world, let's say that you're using Terraform to write some code to deploy stuff in Amazon, and you're using some security linting tools or some checking tools. You can very easily remove one, add another one, make a rule so that it checks a third, this particular set of tests for environments in this region or not. You can play around with those different tools, make them so that it's not dependent on a result of positive for the tool to progress the pipeline. And you can even say, this pipeline is currently going to US East 1. What happens if I go to US West 2? What's Oregon looking like today? How would it deploy, or what would it look like? Or give me a report. So there's lots you can do to kind of divert not only how the pipeline builds itself, but also where does it output its artifacts and build its resources.
I think I want to take a step back here. For folks that are not super familiar with the pipeline, we're throwing around terminology like crazy. I just want to step back. So, like, what are the primary components of a pipeline and some of the terminology that you're using, like artifacts and CI?
Yeah, I mean, a pipeline is just it's a rules engine. It's a loop, and you basically tell the rules engine, like a Jenkins or something like that, hey, you know what? I've got this pile of source information, source code. Could just be, bash script or YAML, or in case of Terraform, it's going to be HCL2. And hey, you know what? Anytime you see a change, run the Terraform code to do a plan, and then email that to me. It could be a really basic pipeline, and it's going to do all that work. And continuous integration, CI. That's a type of pipeline. You can have a CI pipeline, a CD pipeline for deployment or development. There's all those different ways, but really it's just a rules engine that goes through a list of tasks to perform, and then at the end, says success or failure. It's not fancy.
Okay. And this was mostly born out of the application development world and not so much the infrastructure development world. So, like, what are some of the challenges in moving the same idea and paradigm over to the infrastructure world, where things aren't quite as flexible maybe as they are in app development?
I don't know. I feel like if let me give you an opinion here first. If you're working with someone that can't fit into your pipeline because they don't have an API or whatever module you're looking for, like, break up with them. They ain't worth the relationship, right? Level that up. Find someone who will work with your pipeline. So prioritize your pipeline, because that's honestly where the gold is. But as far as that, like the challenges that, let me start with this. The challenges we're trying to solve with pipelining is really just when you deploy something into any environment, we'll say cloud as the example, you probably want to make sure that it's adhering to security best practices, that you're not doing anything kind of like goofy, that your team can see what you're doing, that you can repeat the process so you can very quickly experiment in case you want to make changes. You really want to capture all of that in code. And that's not anything new. Like even if you were working in VMware back in the day, we had Onyx, which would capture the Power CLI commands. Various cloud providers today have different things to capture the commands you're doing and make that happen. So it's really just we want to capture all the steps that we're taking, all the clicks and API calls and whatever that happen to deploy a resource in the cloud, and codify that and turn it into, here's a YAML file, because YAML's good on people's eyeballs, but horrible on their souls. And then that's what it is. It's the same thing we were kind of trying to do back in the config management days with Puppet and Chef. Was like, hey, when you have this server come up, go ahead and install SQL, and here's the password for it, and all that kind of jazz. It's just now we're saying, hey, when you're going to build the server that's going to run, the database server or whatever, go, here's where I want it, and this is the instance type, and all the configuration details are part of that because it's infrastructure as code being put into a pipeline. And then you can go from there, because if you like what you have, you can copy it, and now it's in 2 regions, or say it go to all the regions, or give it to somebody and say, hey, this is exactly how I want you to deploy your stuff. Just run this. You can hand it out. So it gives you a lot of flexibility.